Hi, everyone. Welcome to TPM Today, the December 5th episode. I'm sitting here in Alexandria, Virginia, where it is snowing outside. So first snow of the winter season, even though it's still fall. But really excited to be joining you today. Today is a first of an unusual trio of TPM Today episodes. We're doing 3 straight weeks of TPM rather than the second and fourth Friday of every month, just because of the U.S. holidays and Christmas at the end of this month, to avoid doing a show after the holidays, because no one wants to get up the day after a holiday and watch me talk, right? That sounds miserable. So rather than that, we thought, let's do 3 straight weeks, get three fantastic conversations, and then let you take your holidays with your family. So today, I have a fantastic guest who I'll be introducing in just a second, someone I've known a long time who is working on an extremely important problem that we should all be caring about. But first, a couple things to mention. Somehow, improbably, TPM 26 is only 3 months away. I don't know when this happened or how this happened, but we had a call earlier this week, and it dawned on us that it's literally less than 3 months away now, actually. So if you haven't registered, please do so. It would be a privilege and an honor to see you in Long Beach, California, March 1st through 4th. I will be leading a ever-growing list of technology-focused discussions. I'm going to be speaking with the CEO of Hellman, Jens Dreves. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport. I'm leading a whole bunch of sessions at TPM Tech, where we're going to be talking about things. I wrote a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about how we're sort of taking aim at sacred cows, whether they're true and whether we should still continue to consider them sacred or not. So there's a lot of stuff, obviously a bunch of stuff about AI. We can't escape it. We need to address it head on, help people understand it. So sign up. If you haven't, what are you waiting for? It's the biggest event in our industry, and you need to be there. One other event to mention, hot on the heels of TPM, we also do our annual break bulk and project cargo event in New Orleans every year. That's in April. Early bird pricing on that is ongoing, but ends December 14th. So you're not going to get better rates for that event than you are over the next 9 days. So please sign up for that. I'll be there as well, doing my normal technology-focused sessions in that industry. So can't wait to see you all there in the Big Easy. All right. Story of the week. What else could I be talking about than the CargoWise pricing model change news that broke earlier this week? All credit to Anthony Miller, CargoWise observer extraordinaire, and just in general, someone who's kind of trying to keep the industry, I would say, as honest as possible. He noted this a long time ago. Essentially, CargoWise has changed the nature of how it prices its product to its customers, who are primarily forwarders, NVOs, big global 3PLs. And more than that, I mean, that's like a nerdy kind of like SaaS subscription pricing kind of question or consideration. But more importantly, they've also, the idea behind the pricing change is so that forwarders can essentially pass on a fee to shippers to sort of subsidize the cost of the use of WiseTech Global, their main product, CargoWise. Fascinating development. There's been no shortage of comments on it on LinkedIn, Reddit. I mean, what other forums you might be seeing them in? I have no idea, but a ton of conversation about this. I spoke with a ton of forwarders for this story. I had a very long conversation with the WiseTech team to understand their thinking behind it. A really interesting thing that we'll be keeping track of as it rolls out and as forwarders kind of get their arms around it. So definitely read the story. It's been our top read story on jfc.com this week for good reason. It's super impactful. WiseTech is by far the predominant freight forwarding sort of operating system, software, TMS, freight management, whatever you like to call it, in that space, and what they do matters. So in any case, read the story, and I would love to hear your comments on it, and good, bad, ugly, neutral, whatever. All right, no further ado. I am super delighted to finally have on the show someone who I've known for a very long time, Pierre Garreau, who's CEO and founder of a company called Searoutes. Pierre, thanks so much for joining us today. Really glad you could join.
Thanks for the invite. Always a pleasure to have a discussion with you.
Likewise. So I see Pierre at a lot of events. He's spoken at Journal of Commerce events regularly. Um, Before you tell people about Searoutes, can you give people a little background on yourself? What did you do before starting Searoutes?
Yeah, good question. So, Pierre sounds French enough that you've guessed where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And if you haven't, then you'll see with the accent.
Cleveland, right?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, born and raised in France, but I did spend 10 years in the US. And I come from a math background. I'm one of those math nerds that came into logistics later on. I got an operations research degree in the US, and then did some finance for a little bit, but bad industry for many reasons, and ended up in logistics, much better. And so it's been six years I'm working at Searoutes. I'll tell you about the company a little bit more in details, what we do, but
Well,
it's fun.
just real quickly, because this can be a lead into Searoutes. What was the connection point into logistics?
Yeah. So it's funny. After finance, basically, I figured I got to do something that's really close to my heart in many ways. I'm a sailor, and I met Carsten, who's my co-founder on Sea Routes, and so he's also a windsurfer. Both of us were like, well, we got to build some sort of tool that helps, vessels, sailing boats route better, and so that's how we ended up in logistics from kind of the sailing background into we can help vessels route better. So that was the entry point.
Okay.
I had
I don't
I
think
had
I
no
ever knew
clue.
that story actually. Even
Yeah,
I met Pierre. This would have been 2019, I want to say, at the box
the
office
box. That's right. Yeah, I
in
do remember that
Marseille.
meeting. Yeah, it's
You were
correct.
one of the first cohort, right, for Zabox,
That's
which
right.
is
Yeah,
CGM's kind of incubation hub, right? So
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
it does come from that sailing background and just a need to do something really close to my heart. What's funny is that when we were trying to route vessels better, I had no clue what logistics was about. So that's, 7 years now, and then discovered a whole new world, and now I don't want to leave it. It's like this is
You can't.
exactly
You're
where
not
I wanted to
allowed.
be. You
You're not
can't.
allowed. It's
That's
once
right.
you're in it, it's like the mafia. I always say this. You're not allowed to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. What is Sea Roots right now? Who does it serve? What's the kind of core problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so Searoutes is a small company. We're about 15 based in the south of France, Marseille, and in the rest of Europe. We started to optimize vessel routes, and the idea was to save on bunker costs, so mainly for CMA, Hapag, Maersk, and so forth. And back at the box, so that, the way the company builder works is you have partners coming in, and there's forwarders that were coming to try to look at the startups and stuff. And so I met with Seva Logistics back then there, and through discussions with them, I realized that transport was the third largest polluter. It's 14% of the global CO2 emissions. So we figured if we can help the large ocean carriers optimize their routes, probably we can also optimize the container routes, not just the vessel routes. And so that's how it started. So I co-founded the company in 2019, so it's a bit more than 6 years. And the idea is to help cargo owners manage their transport, all the while reducing carbon emissions. And at the moment, carbon taxes, right? So we'll talk about it probably,
Or
but so it's
ECS
emissions and it
going up?
taxes. Yeah.
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 Just to be clear, because I know it's not necessarily always clear in my mind. I sort of have buckets for the world you work in. There's companies that measure carbon, whether direct or indirect. So if you're a cargo owner, you don't have a lot of control over what your vessel operator is doing. Then there's
That's right. Yeah.
companies that help mitigate that or
Yeah.
strategize around you. So where do you kind of fall in that spectrum?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So both, right? So obviously there's the measurement piece, and that's complicated enough to do. There's many reasons for why that's complicated, but so that's it. How do you get an accurate number?
Yeah.
And that number itself, but between you and I, it should be a commodity. We shouldn't, people shouldn't have to pay for it. I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot saying this, but the number in itself doesn't really matter. What matters is how do you set up a trajectory towards reducing it, and what concretely are you going to do to, to reduce your emissions? Not just the emissions, but also like supply chain resiliency, fuel savings, tax savings. There's lots of benefits that come with it. But so the end goal is to try to do both, is to measure and the reduce. So the value is in helping shippers realize the reduction, realize the efficiency. And so Searoutes does both at the moment, and we continue to grow to make sure we can do more of the
The latter.
let me help you out,
Yeah.
rather than the measurement.
Yeah, interesting. So, okay, I think it's a very interesting point you make about the availability of this data being a
Yeah.
roadblock toward progress, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Why historically has it been hard to capture this data, and why is it in 2025 with $7 quadrillion being invested in AI and data centers and compute power? Why is it still a challenge?
Yeah, so now we did mention the buzzwords. So obviously you can go on ChatGPT nowadays or any other tool and ask for the carbon emission of your container between Shanghai and Rotterdam. The problem with this to some extent is that you get no clarity on where that number comes from, what were the assumptions made, what can you do to change that number? All this is kind of a black box. So what's difficult when computing the emissions of shippers in general, it's to give it enough information so that shippers can action a few things, a few levers to reduce, right? So there's it's very simple the way to compute emissions. Basically, you need to put two data sets in front of each other. The first one is the transport orders of the shippers. So you have to get that somehow. That's, different systems and stuff. And then once you have that in front of it, you have to put a visibility data set. So it's basically like traces, routes,
See the
ports,
path that a vessel
locations.
actually took versus what it was supposed to take,
Exactly,
and
all
all the
that stuff.
associated
Yeah.
legs. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
visibility data set, and then with it also an asset data set, which is, which vessels, what fuels, what engines, what speeds, what are the characteristics. And so what's difficult in computing the emissions is to put these two data sets, overlay them, and make sure that they make sense, right?
Yeah.
And we can go into why that's
Easy to
difficult.
talk about, hard to actually do, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but in 2025, with all the tools we have, it should be just, flip of a switch to get that. It's,
And credit to Pierre, I can remember him talking about using AI to manage this before ChatGPT and before everyone in the world was talking about AI. So
that's right. And we still try not to use the word, but,
I
we're
know
just doing, you know what I mean? Like we're just doing the work. Um,
it's got
we
so much
were,
baggage now.
we were
Crazy.
we were at an event in Hamburg, AI Summit recently.
Yep.
Somebody went on stage and he said something like, we use um human instinct model. He called it HI, human instinct. He refused to use the word AI, and for good reasons. For good reason.
That's awesome. Yeah. We're just gonna go retro. Be like,
Yeah,
actually, humans are
yeah,
pretty powerful, huh? Right. So
that's right.
that's funny. Well, okay. I want to talk to you about something I feel like I have sensed on a very anecdotal, non-quantitative basis, just purely qualitative, which is there has been a lot that's gone on over the past couple of years, especially in 2025. We have wars, we have in terms of international trade, we have tariffs, we have the Suez Canal having been blocked for a long period of time. And I say that because I don't feel like a lot of conversations from shippers right now revolve around carbon
Carbon.
reduction initiatives. And so what
Yeah.
I'm curious about is, from your perspective, is it just that those things are still happening, but they've diminished in priority? They're still happening, they're still a high priority. It's just there's other high priorities that are competing with it. Or are we really in a period where all of the momentum that happened, like maybe say over the past 10 years, has actually slowed?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that slow down. I have direct pointers to that. I think the question you're asking is, and what all the shippers have been asking this year is, what's the return on investment for carbon? I think that's really where what the question was. The obvious culprit on this is the tariffs that came up this year. A good example, in the office right next to mine, there's a pretty large producer of wood flooring in Europe, and he's exporting to the US. Serving typical like Home Depot and the largest brands, and the tariff for him this year was about 10 to 25% increase on his typical price.
Cogs,
And his net margin is somewhere in the 5 to 15% range. So, what either Home Depot can pass on the cost to the consumer in the end, which probably happened this year, or it doesn't, and ask the supplier, so this wood flooring producer, to damp the cost, to swallow the cost, and he has no net margin then. And so for him this year, the whole year was about cost reduction. And so his question, and he was a big proponent of carbon, the first one to get into measurement reductions, optimizing the logistics to reduce carbon and stuff. But this year was just firefighting, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's also disruption, warehouse management, inventory management. So it was a really, really crazy year. So one of the reasons why the conversation shifted this year is because there's so much firefighting on where is my net margin, where's my profit, and why are my warehouses full where I want them empty, and empty where I want them full. That it was really hard for him to think about carbon.
Well, that dovetails perfectly. I don't mean to be plugging TPM any more than I already have, but literally we changed the theme of the program early on because we were hearing that exact same thing from shippers. It's like cost cutting in ways to offset whatever margin, kind of shrinkage there was, is basically the most important thing that they're dealing with these days.
No, it's a shame because these guys have put in investments already, starting in 2024, and they had to like stop projects in the middle. Maybe they were in the deploying solutions like Searoutes or something else, and then this gets put on pause and resumes next year.
Well, so okay, I guess what I want to get at also is like if I'm a shipper and I have a carbon emission or carbon reduction initiative, especially if that over emissions I don't directly control, right? Like the only way I can control it is through my procurement activities. Or
that's exactly right.
Or maybe if I'm big enough, I can like influence my partners at a high level, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Though, did those types of initiatives just stop because of all this firefighting, or are they ongoing but no one's talking about them?
Yeah, I think you're right. So they're still ongoing, and they've been, people that initiated all these initiatives internally at these firms, they had to just change the narrative to keep going, right? So what has happened is they've reframed the carbon initiatives from hey, we're going to be doing something good for the planet and for consumers are going to love us, to let's build more resilient supply chain. Let's find some tax savings. Let's find some fuel savings for road freight and, and everything that's fuel recovery related.
Right.
Some of the visibility provider use the word anti-fragile. These are all benefits.
Stealing
Yeah.
from the web.
Yeah, exactly. Stealing from Shipeo. In any case, I think the narrative has changed around carbon. The initiatives are still there. The benefits are savings, tax savings mainly, and resiliency. So we don't frame the problem from a carbon perspective, but it's still there. It's still ongoing.
I want to touch on this really quickly. This is a huge issue that's sort of sprung into the news over the last couple of weeks. Is there seems to be a small light at the end of the tunnel around returning to Suez routings. Can you because obviously, like what we've talked about, take the tariffs aside, take all the other upheaval aside. Even if you had the best intentions, you're shipping Asia to Europe, or you're shipping Southeast Asia to all water to the US East Coast, whatever it was taking you through the Suez, your best intentions, you have zero control if all of a sudden there's additional fuel being burned to go around Africa, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
What would be the impact of if Suez becomes viable again on a broad scale? What's the impact in terms of like reduction in
emissions, yeah. And reduction in fuel costs for the
fuel.
carrier, right?
Yeah,
Which will
right.
be
Absolutely.
super happy to continue charging its client for whatever it is it was charging via Cape of Good Hope, and then suddenly
Yeah, yeah.
savings in fuel. So
Right.
tensions around this too, but so the difference is about 7 days of travel. So, depending on which service
Yeah.
and where you're coming from, it's about 7 days, and it's roughly 4,000 miles. So in terms of CO2 emissions, we're talking about 250 kilos on a TU. So that's about 25% difference. So it is
25%
significant.
extra to
Yeah.
go around the Cape.
Exactly, around
Yeah.
Cape
Wow.
of Good Hope, yeah, and that's on a Shanghai to Rotterdam typical example. So,
Got it.
um,
So significant. I mean, we're not talking
yeah,
about an insignificant thing that people have just sort of like internalized as normal now, which is
that's
crazy.
right. And think about the cost of bunker, right? Like
Yeah,
25% is huge on a trip like this.
sure.
So, that means that freight rates could go down 25% potentially, if you think about it from like kind of a direct cost perspective. So that's a funny metric. You've
There's
seen,
all
I think you
sorts of
guys.
other things, right? Like, do the carriers have had a lot of capacity absorbed
That's right.
by
Yeah.
by this? So it's not just how much fuel costs are. There's all sorts of interesting dynamics.
That's right. Yeah, and I think other people would be better
Yeah,
positioned to talk
no,
about it
that's
than I would be. But
sure.
there's still stuff around Suez. So we've seen vessels coming through Suez more recently, and so it does happen. I think CMA Franklin was one of the first vessels, and we've seen also a vessel use the North Sea Passage this year as an alternative, which is also much shorter. Also has obviously a much smaller footprint, but is a total disaster for the environment, right? So,
Right.
um,
Oh yeah.
you know,
It's trade will flow. The least resistance. The trade will flow.
yeah,
Um,
that's right.
Sorry, my dog has joined the show. If
The
you can't hear it.
conversation,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I'm very upset about extra emissions. Let's talk really quickly about fuels of the future. I think this is an interesting dynamic that, and I will stop talking so you can answer, so my dog does not keep.
Sorry, no.
How should we think about the way that vessel operators are prioritizing which fuel might be available? There's so many considerations to this that we don't have time in 8 minutes to discuss. There's fuel availability, which ports are have stock of fuels, and does that impact and also not to mention what is the most efficient and most carbon efficient and least carbon producing types of fuels. What's your view on this, having just lived in the data forever?
Yeah, a good way to phrase it. So first, I think there's two things: that there's the fuels themselves and there's the infrastructure around it, which is a big topic too. And I think
Yeah.
getting the fuels where they need to be at the time where they need to be, it's going to be part of the equation. So that's one thing. And then also on this roadmap to decarbonization, there's also the idea that every port has been electrified so that vessels can be plugged and stop their auxiliary engines, which also pollute a lot at the moment.
Sure.
But so on the fuels themselves, it's kind of hard to. I don't have a crystal ball, but there's two big ones at the moment that are being talked about is methanol, which can be net zero when produced, but is highly flammable. And the other one is ammonia that has no carbon emissions when it's burned, but there's safety risks and it's highly toxic.
Quite
Right?
volatile,
So
right?
yeah, exactly. It's quite volatile too, right?
Yeah.
So, and the problem with these two fuels is that they also they have lower energy densities than traditional fuels that are used, like heavy fuel and stuff. So there's no silver bullet with these two ones. So
And there's
probably what will
hydrogen.
happen,
I mean, I've had
and
clean
there's hydrogen. Yeah,
fuel people whisper in my ear, it has to be hydrogen. There's no other option but hydrogen.
that's right. Yeah. So there's hydrogen. There's projects in Europe for smaller vessels and barges that could be electrified. So that's also another way to do it. So what you'll see to IMO 2050 to the net zero goals is that we'll have a mix of these. We've seen CEOs of ocean carriers have mixed feelings and mixed speeches about the topic. Some of them say that the new vessels are coming in today and they're going to be operational for the next 25 years, so they'll still be there when it's 2050, and they burn, obviously, to the extent that they'll produce CO2. So that's you'll have a mixed fleet, between now and 2050, and we won't be able to get to a full net zero fleet.
It's a really, really, really messy picture. Honestly, like when I think about
It is, yeah.
when I think about how ports invest in their infrastructure, when I think about carriers, how they invest, about how a customer of a carrier, whether it's a forwarder or a shipper, compels a carrier, if they even have any like leverage in that negotiation with the vessel operators, like this should be the fuel. It's like so convoluted.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you're bringing this into the discussion. At the moment, from the shipper perspective, what are their options? It's either they can buy, let's say, biofuels, which are at a premium. They're very expensive at the moment, or they can choose the right services or the right carrier for their port pair and try to optimize their allocation to get the same reduction. So that's kind of their levers at the moment. And I also don't want to paint a picture of maritime is really dirty and it's an industry of of polluters and stuff. Like between air freight and ocean freight, there's still a 20 to 100 multiple.
There's no comparison.
There's no comparison, right? So luxury brand shipping stuff around the world on airplanes, it's a total no-no. If you could do this on vessels, you'd save 20, 100x, carbon emissions. So that's something to remember, right?
Yeah, fair. So let's almost out of time, but I did want to reference the IMO discussion or talk about the IMO discussion you referenced. So about 6 weeks ago, I lost track of this.
There was October.
A consequential meeting in London of the IMO where they delayed for a year a decision on a net zero framework, a maritime net zero framework. There's a story that Nicole, our producer, is posting in the links on this if you want to catch up on that. We don't have time to go through all the particulars. What I wanted to get a sense from you is how big a setback is this? Is it a big setback, or is this just sort of a bump in the road of a very long path anyway?
Yeah, so what's difficult about this is that decisions were made in April, and there's lots of excitement on getting this totally validated. And you're right, in October there was a delay. So fair enough. So delay is not like we're not going to do it. It just means that okay. So 1 year later we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's a bit of a compromise considering the political pressure. But the idea of the framework is that vessel owner needs to progressively transition towards fuels that have lower intensity in terms of CO2 emissions all the way to zero. And so that's the idea. And the framework sets global guidelines on how to do this per ship categories. And the idea is to pull resources on, what fuels are we going to develop? Where are they going to be available, and so forth. So it's definitely a blow to some extent, but there's also like regional pressure. So at the moment, the strongest legislation is in Europe around EU ETS. Exactly.
Those surcharges, these are the emission trading schemes. Those were just set at a much higher rate, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then Fuel EU is strong. And then you have like pockets of regulations. So, in the US, obviously, California is driving a lot of that on like reporting standards and requirements. And in Asia, you have places like in Singapore where all publicly listed companies have to report their scope 3. And so shippers, have to make the effort to go into the details of, and try to find solutions to reduce their emissions from logistics. So there is regional pressure, and so maybe the IMO hasn't found the answer, but locally things will continue getting pushed.
Yeah, so much more to talk about. We're almost out of time. This is the problem with this show. There's, we talk about good stuff, and there's never enough time. Last question. Every guest gets this question. Definitely less important than net zero frameworks. But who's your favorite musician or band? And you have to tell me why.
Oh damn, yeah. I've been listening to the Fugees a lot recently. I'm
Nice
kind of nostalgic from the 90s, I guess. It tells you how old I am, right? Probably. But yeah,
Okay.
just like the storytelling and the social commentary from the 90s.
And great music.
Still,
Just like
yeah,
great music.
and great music, and still
Yeah.
very relevant from today.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's very interesting. Spotify I haven't done it myself, but Spotify has been doing this thing where it tells you what your music age is, basically based on what you're listening to.
What you listen, yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta check this out.
That would be interesting to check what yours is relative to the Fugees. Great one. No one's ever said that before, so that's a new name to add to the playlist. Pierre, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, best way. I'm there. I post sometimes, so yeah, and I do respond to messages.
Cool. Awesome. And check out Searoutes if you want to learn more about what Pierre and his team are doing. Thanks so much. Super timely, important discussion, and have a great New Year. All right. Last dad joke, last thing of the day of the episode, dad joke of the week. It's a quick one. What's faster than an escalator? An escasooner. And with that, another episode of TPM Today concludes. Thank you so much to Pierre for an awesome discussion. Thanks to everyone. Sigab, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Mike, Sarah, Rob, everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. Great conversation. Super important. We'll be keeping tabs on that in 26. And I'll be back next week with another great show. And the next week after that with another great show. But in the meantime, keep warm if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, and have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.